Oh, hello, world. Welcome to Comic Book News. I'm your old pal, Dan Shaheen. Yeah, that's right. I'm back with another interview with the comic book stars. Today, none other than Craig Yoe of Yoe Books. But he's also Craig Yoe of a lot of other things, man. This guy's got a career on him. He's got a resume to beat the band. We'll talk to him about his time working with Marvin Glass, designing toys, lead designer, Marvin Glass Toy Designs, who I had never heard of before. And then I go, I can't believe I never heard of these guys because they made everything wonderful. Worked for them. Then went on to head the Muppets. Worked with them. Then went on to a solo career doing amazing stuff with Nickelodeon, designing Happy Meal toys, just doing amazing things all over the creative world. If you boil this guy down into one word, it's got to be artist, including the flaky part. It's so great because I talked to him and I tried to set up an interview so long ago when I made this back when before I could afford Photoshop. I was using the GIMP to make thumbnails, and I created this really one of my ugliest thumbnails. It's not his fault. And I had tried to set up an interview with him. He's like, Dan, I'm moving to Berlin. Okay. No, so not a great time. So he set me up with one of the authors that he publishes, Megan, I'm spacing on her last name, about teaching artfully. Ended up being one of my favorite interviews. Really cool look at somebody outside of the traditional people that I talk to, guys, in other words, men. So it was great to have like a female cartoonist in here. Not for lack of trying, by the way. I reach out to all kinds of cartoonists, and it's really tough. In fact, scheduling interviews and reaching out and just setting these things up and making it happen at the right time is the toughest part of the show. And so that's why things are changing. It's not my last interview, for sure not my last, but it's not going to be interview of the week format every Thursday from now on. So I'm actually spinning up to a new time on Tuesdays. I'm going to be running a little show I call the Danger Room, where I'm just going to freeform. It's going to be me and whatever. Streaming, talking, whatever. Thursday is going to be a little more structured. Sometimes I'll have a guest. Sometimes I won't. I'll usually have a topic. We'll come in here and talk about comics. I was ready to give this thing up altogether. And I was really sad because a few people didn't respond well to like some of my interview questions. And I got an email out of nowhere that really changed my mind from I just call her Jess in England, who says that she and her husband make comics, love comics, watch this show every Thursday, their time in England while they're eating dinner. And like, they love it. And they're like, if you got to stop, but we love what you're doing. That was everything to me. So I super appreciate that. If you want to help me out, you don't got to go to those lengths. All you've got to do is click like on this video. If you're not subscribed already, maybe click subscribe, click that bell to get notifications when I do cool interviews like this, and I'll keep doing them. Or when I just do any kind of show. The other thing you can do, and coming up next week, we'll be doing the $1 Million Mailbox. So please, if you want to see your comics on this show, send them here to the $1 Million Mailbox, P.O. Box 1163, Arcata, California, 95518. It's beautiful here in sunny Arcata, California, and it's a great look for your comics. We'll spread them out. I'll bring in Larry Young of AIT Planet Lair, and we'll talk about them. And speaking of Larry, long overdue. I'm going to do a solo Larry interview. I think that's going to be my next interview and maybe my last for a while after the next $1 Million Mailbox. Okay. Have I done enough show business? I think I have. It's time to talk to our guest. So let's bring him in. But wait, let's not go here. Where do we want to go? Yeah, we can go here. No, wait, maybe more appropriate. We'll go into the neighborhood of make-believe because this guy is a lot of fun. And he also hit me to some early TV stuff that I didn't even know was like an inspiration to me. And we'll talk about Gallardi with him. And I have a huge list of things to talk about. So let's not waste any more time. Let's bring him in. Hey, Craig Yoe.
Hey, Dan, how are you doing, my buddy?
I'm doing really good, man. I can really hear you.
Oh,
okay, great.
That's good. You mean that like like a figurative or a literal way? You can really hear me, man.
Well, your work speaks to me on many levels.
Oh, it speaks to you. That's great. I hope it's never rude and always has nice things to say, because I think the world of you, Dan.
Oh, thank you, man. I'm shocked anytime anybody tells me they've watched this show even once.
I'm a viewer, dude. It's nice to be on the show, but I'm on it, watching it all the time. I see you talk to Steve Jeppy, and I know you talk to Megan, and I know you talk to that Michael Finn guy who's got a fabulous art collection. I watch all your shows, dude.
Cool, man. Well,
I'm secretly just from England. That email was from me.
That wouldn't surprise me.
But it wasn't my husband and I sitting down for dinner. It's just more like me, putting a frozen pizza in the oven and watching your show from wherever I am these days. I don't know where I am. Oh yeah, I am in Berlin. Can you see the beautiful skyline behind us? No, that's just my green curtain. But yeah, we're in Berlin. Cool.
Yeah. You're international, man. You're talking about going.
I'm an international man of mystery. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you've got a storied career to back that up too. So, like, I don't know. I want to start just back at the beginning, because you tipped me off about Marvin Glass, and I looked this up, and it's like, this is the most prestigious, like, toy designing firm known to man. I mean, dude, they made everything, right down to like the chattering glass. Wait a minute, I got it in here. In the danger room, right down to the chattering teeth.
Right.
Operation Mousetrap. Like, if it's an amazing design and an iconic toy, like so many came out of it.
They did Simon, and they did Light Bright, and Mr. Machine, the walking robot guy, and all kinds of.
I had never seen before, but as soon as I saw it, I'm like, I have to get one of these things. This is so.
Yeah, amazing. They were really way cool. Yeah. I've got a few myself somewhere in a warehouse on the East Coast of the United States till I find a permanent place to live over here in Europe.
So your bio tells me you got a job as lead designer at Marvin Glass. Like, how does that work? How does that become your first gig? And like, that seems like a pretty prestigious thing. You must have had a hell of a sketchbook.
Well, it wasn't my first thing. I mean, I started, I don't know, career-wise. I mean, I think my first career was I was the minister of a church, a pastor of a church, a hippie Christian church in Akron, Ohio. And but then I went to Chicago to work for a children's publisher that did Christian books and things like that. And that was a fascinating place in itself. It's called David C. Cook, and it was over 100 years old by the time I got there. But they worked with a lot of comic book artists to do comic books for kids. So they worked with Joe Kubert and Lou Fine, and
would this be like the treasure chest type stuff?
Yeah, except treasure chest was Catholic. This was like the Protestant version.
Okay.
In fact, I think I'm skipping ahead. I think David C. Cook was probably way before treasure chest was probably inspired by the comic book that David C. Cook did called Pix, and they did the complete Bible in comic form, illustrated by Andre LeBlanc, who I got to be friends with. And Andre had been an assistant on The Spear with Will Eisner. So, in fact, I arranged for Andre LeBlanc Day at David C. Cook, and they flew him out from the East Coast, but I scheduled it for the same weekend that the Chicago Comic Con was happening, and Will Eisner was a guest, so I got to reunite those two guys, and through Andre really get to know Will real good, and so that was kind of a fun weekend. But Andre was a character. He stayed at my house during the thing, and like he could talk your arm and leg off, and he was doing that. And then all of a sudden he said, "Oh, I said I'm a little tired, but I want to continue this conversation." He said, "Excuse me for a few minutes." He went upstairs and stood on his head for I don't know 10, 15 minutes, and then came back down all refreshed. He was ready to go.
Nice.
He was ready to go all night, but he was a brilliant illustrator, comic book artist, and I don't think too many people know his work now, though.
No, I'm not familiar.
He did some great stuff in the Golden Age and for, assisting Eisner and that kind of good stuff.
So you really cut your professional teeth on comics then from the very beginning. That was your first entry into the art world, would you say? As a professional.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I was, since my mom bought me a prescription, a subscription. It was a prescription of sorts, I guess. A subscription, though, to Walt Disney's Comics and Stories. And I got so turned on by comics. I just loved them, and then, but when I got a little older, I thought, like, going back to my minister days, I remember the verse in the Bible, when you become older, you put away childish things. And so, like, getting older was going into junior high, and you didn't want your friends or the girls that you might meet there to know that you read comic books. That was like, that would have been death. You would have been laughed out or probably beat up or something, So I stopped reading comic books, as I got into 6th and 7th grade. But interestingly, I think around 8th grade, this friend of mine took me aside and said, "I remember you liked comic books when you were a kid, and I'm reading comic books again." I go, "What?" And he told me about Marvel Comics and Spider-Man and Steve Ditko and Stan Lee, and there was a small secret group of us because, again, we didn't want anybody to know we read comics. In fact, I remember concocting a story that when I went to the drugstore and was standing at the comic book rack, if some girl from my class saw me, I was going to tell her, like, "Oh, I'm babysitting my nephew this weekend," and so I thought I'd get him some of this childish reading matter, to entertain him.
Well, so you were the perfect age at that moment for, like, kind of the audience Stan Lee was reaching for.
Yeah. It was perfect. I started getting Spider-Man and Fantastic Four in the very early issues, and then I became an obsessed collector. So I eventually got them all, and then foolishly sold them years later because I didn't have a lot of money, but I sold them, I don't know, 50 cents each or something. All those, key Marvel books, so I could get some more money. So when conventions were starting up, and I wanted money to buy my childhood love of Carl Barks comics and Little Lulu comics, so
so
big financial, dumb move, but I sure did enjoy those comics a lot, so what the hell.
I remember I traded a copy of, I think it was X-Men #2 in just the worst beat up condition for a Calvin and Hobbes trade paperback collection or something.
Yeah.
I still think I got the better part of the deal. I don't know.
Absolutely. I don't know. Carl Barks, who did Uncle Scrooge, and John Stanley, who did Lulu, they were geniuses. And there's been periods of comics fandom where they were more well known and touted and courted and all that stuff. But I think, unfortunately, I'm sure there's a lot of younger readers that don't know anything about them. But,
Little Lulu, luckily has made comebacks in the comics world. Like when I have my shop, Dark Horse did a whole series of
yeah.
Those were a smash hit in my store. Like,
Oh, great.
could
Great,
not
great,
keep
great.
them in stock in big piles, which I didn't do
Yeah.
almost anything in my store, but those sold like crazy.
Well, Little Lulu's artist, John Stanley, became like a father to me because when I was at David C. Cook Publishing Company, I would reach out to old cartoonists because we needed artists to draw the material and stuff. So I had John Stanley do stuff, and Alex Toth and Steve Bissett and all kinds of different artists like that. I'd have them do stuff for the comics and magazines we were creating for kids and stuff. So I got to know John Stanley from I had tracked him down and used him a little, commissioned him to do some work for the publications. But then when I moved to New York, I'm getting a little ahead of things, but when I moved to New York to work for the Muppets, I needed to find a place for me and my family to live. So I contacted John, and he found me a house a few doors from his place. So we got to be really close.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, and he took good care of me back then. And I taped an interview with him. Someday I'm going to publish that. God, it's been decades now.
So back it up just a step. I don't want to dwell too much on the toy years, other than what I saw was that you worked on Cabbage Patch Kids, My Little Pony, maybe, and maybe Care Bears. I might be mixing those two.
Yeah, I worked on that kind of stuff, but that was actually for a little toy company before I joined Marvin Glass. They were doing a lot of licensed things like with Cabbage Patch Kids and Transformers and all that stuff. But so I left that company and then went to the toy think tank, Marvin Glass. And Marvin Glass was the first and largest toy think tank. And they invented Light Bright and Chattering Teeth and Giant Sunglasses and Simon and Mousetrap and just all these kind of famous baby boomer toys and stuff like that. And Rock'em Sock'em Robots, that was one of my favorites.
If you'd only done one of those, if they had only done one of those things, it would be like you would know these guys. But like it was so clear to me that so much of what we loved about a lot of those toys came straight from the design. It sure wasn't. Wasn't the fun of playing Mousetrap. I'll tell you that.
Well, you know what? One of the owners, partners of the company, admitted to me that Mousetrap was a knockoff of Rube Goldberg's, wacky inventions and stuff. So, again, comics were still kind of in my life. In fact, Stan Lee came to the Marvin Glass once, and they had me give him the tour and eat lunch with them and stuff like that because they didn't know comics. And Stan and Margaret Loesch was trying to get Marvin Glass to do X-Men toys, and the partners asked me what I thought of it, and I said, I think it's a good idea. But they eventually passed on doing X-Men toys because they thought they were too violent.
Yeah.
Which I'm not saying I don't appreciate the fact that they were against violence, but from a financial viewpoint, a few years later, they finally talked this little guy into making Marvel toys, and and then he went on to make Marvel movies, and so it was they did pass on something that was really significant when they shined on good old Stan Lee. But I had fun. When it came in that day, I brought in a bunch of old Golden Age comic books, and he helped me identify the artists and stuff like that. And there are a lot of more funny animal comic books. I remember him turning to Margaret Loesch. She goes, "See, I told you we should start up. Forget X-Men. We should start doing funny animal comics again." So I think he liked that stuff. That's another interview I haven't published yet, but I did flew out to LA and sat with a couple hours with Stan and talked to him about all of his old funny comic books he used to edit and write and things like that. And so someday we'll do a collection of those, I hope.
That sounds awesome. So what I've got here in my notes anyway is it was a jump from Marvin Glass right to working with Jim Henson.
Yeah, Jim had seen some Muppet toys I had designed, and he really liked them. And when they were looking for a new creative director, they rang me up and brought me out to New York, and you know, and Jim and I hit it off, and I got the gig, and it was every bit as fun and fascinating as you might think. And Jim was every bit as wonderful as you might think. It's interesting. I met a few cartoonists, most of them like John Stanley or whatever, where they were splendid fellows. But there's a few cartoonists I met who did these cute little fun, sweet characters, but they themselves weren't so lovable, you know, and wonderful and warm and fuzzy. But Jim was the real deal. He was really a man of creativity, obviously, but he was a man of peace and love, and
Yeah.
he once sat down and he gathered his staff together in the big conference room and sat around the table and goes like, okay, let's come up with a property. And then he didn't finish that sentence by saying, let's come up with a property that sells lots of McDonald's Happy Meal toys or this or that. He said, and makes us a ton of money like that. But he said, let's come up with a property that brings peace to the world in our lifetime. And that from that meeting came Fraggle Rock. You know, unfortunately, we can look around us today and we don't exactly have peace and love in the world, but I admire Jim for trying, and that was his motivation, you know. So he was a beautiful man. I really enjoyed working for him, and he and I hit it off, and it was a good time.
That was the era. That was the era that, because looking at this picture, and you're saying Fraggle Rock, so I'm saying 80s, mid to late 80s.
Well, Fraggle Rock was actually before my time. I just knew about that meeting. I like to tell that anecdote about him because talk about his motivation. I mean, I'll tell you another little anecdote of something that happened right when I was there. I was involved in, because of my toy background and all that stuff, they had me involved with a lot of the licensed product stuff too. And we once came to Jim. Jim had to approve the different types of licensing deals that happened. And one time, one of the leading soft drink companies came to him and he said, no, I don't want to do a commercial with the Muppets for them. You know, I think, you know, that stuff's bad for kids. You know, it's not healthy, you know, so I'm going to turn it down. And it was like a multi-million-dollar deal, you know, but he turned it down because he thought it wasn't healthy for kids. And then a couple months later, some marshmallow company came to him, talk about pure sugar, and they came to the Muppets. They wanted to do Muppet marshmallows, and he said, "Yeah, okay."
Yeah.
And you know, and we said, like, Jim, you turned down like this major soft drink company. What's with the marshmallows? He goes, in his best Kermit voice. I mean, he's talked like Kermit. I like marshmallows. You know, so that was all we needed to know. He likes marshmallows, you know.
Well, and also, if you're gonna say like which one honestly is causing more damage to an entire generation of children,
right.
Marshmallows, all right. You can have your marshmallows, kids.
Yeah, right. And it wasn't a multi-million-dollar deal. It was just a little kind of a side deal. Speaking of his voice, I remember the first day I arrived at work that he was out of town doing something, some TV project in LA or something. And so he called me up to welcome me on board and stuff. And you know, my assistant said, "Craig, you have an important call on line 1." So I picked up the phone. He goes, "Hi, how are you?" You know, and it's like, I go, "Oh my," in my head, I say, "Oh my God, I'm talking to Kermit the Frog." You know, it's like so crazy.
It'd be great if he said hi ho when it.
Yeah, right. He was a great guy, cool guy, and I miss him to this day. I learned a lot from him. You know, I was thinking about, because I knew you would ask me about him. I think the thing I learned the most from him, obviously, his creativity was inspiring, and he was a nice guy. But I think the thing I learned most was about quality.
Yeah,
he'd always be willing to delay a project or work. I mean, he was a workaholic. I think anybody that knows him would say that. But I mean, he was having fun, and why not? And but he would never skimp on the quality side of things, and that really, I mean, we all strive for that to an extent, but in the biz world, it's not always quality. It's, lowest cost and quickest and things like that. That's the motivating factor. But
For sure.
but you can see it in his work, right? I mean, all the details and the quality, and that's what made him, and
Yeah.
made him so beloved, and his
Well,
work so beloved. The quality in it, the time and the effort.
I think also the attention to character as
Mm-hmm.
and like investing real, like creating real complete, all the Muppets were the major Muppets anyway, and most of them were just like completely real characters. Like Kermit
Right.
is Kermit. It's not like Senior Wences, right? Or something.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's not Charlie
Yeah.
McCarthy and what's his face, Bergen. It was
Right.
like, these are like, this is a whole, he created whole universes and whole worlds that
Right.
very much like a Stan Lee and a Jack Kirby kind of
Yeah.
magic, like whole universes sprang from that guy.
I don't think he ever met Stan, but once I got to New York, I took the opportunity to invite different people over to visit the Muppets because I wanted to meet them too. So I invited Steve Ditko to come over and visit Muppet headquarters. And I,
Wow.
I I remember them telling me, on the intercom, Craig, you have a guest down in the lobby. So I went down the stairs, and the lobby was set up so the chairs you sat on for this lobby waiting room were a row of theater chairs, and then behind those chairs was the wall that was painted with all these Muppet characters, also sitting in theater chairs and stuff like that. So it looked like you were sitting in a theater with all the Muppets sitting behind you. So I come down the spiral staircase, and there sits Steve Ditko with all the Muppets gathered around behind him and stuff like that. I wish I would have got a picture. He wasn't a guy that liked to have people take photos, but
Right.
it was kind of it was an interesting day for him. I probably could have gotten away with it. He probably would have let me.
Well, so
But
but did Steve Ditko like really enjoy the Muppets and what for what it was?
before I invited him over, I don't think he ever even heard of the Muppets. I
That's even
once
better. That's even better.
Yeah, and I don't think he even heard of them. But I gave him a tour. The Muppet headquarters was in an old Victorian 3-story townhouse, but then a couple blocks away we had the creature shop where we actually made the puppets.
Yeah.
And in fact, I eventually became under my wing, and I was in charge of the creature shop. But that day I took Steve over there, and he was fascinated by it. It really reminded me of one of his old, amazing adult fantasy comic book tales of like some puppet master and, in some kind of, environment and stuff like that. And he loved he asked questions, and he loved looking at the, the work we were doing and how we were making things out of felt and feathers and ping pong balls and stuff like that. He was really into it. And then and then I took him to lunch. And then after lunch, we went back over to the main headquarters, and Jim was back from some meeting. So I took Steve to meet Jim. And I said, Steve, this is Jim Henson. He was the creator, the guy behind the Muppets. And Jim, this is Steve Ditko. He was the artist behind Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, and they shook each other. Boy, again, another lost photo moment. But I thought of that, like at the moment, I was like in fanboy heaven. Here's these two powerhouse creators that my heroes, and I'm introducing them, and Kermit the Frog is shaking hands with Doctor Strange, or Spider-Man. Don't get any web on your foot there, Kermit. So
What year would this have been? What year was this?
No, but I want to say, but here's the punchline. I don't think they knew or cared. I don't think Jim cared about
really?
Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. Nah, that wasn't his thing.
Surprises me.
I mean, think about his work. That wasn't his thing. Now, I'll tell you what. The publicity department once came to me and said, Parade Magazine wants to do an article on Jim's favorite comics. And I go, really? That's weird. I go, oh, that's great. Good to hear. And they go, well, so what's his favorite comics? I go, I don't really know. They said, well, we need that by tomorrow. So come up with a list of what Jim's too busy. He's like in London or something. So you come up with a list of his favorite comics. So I asked his wife, and I thought about it, and they just wanted me to make my own list. But I knew he liked Pogo. He really loved Walt
That
Kelly's
makes
Pogo.
perfect sense.
That makes perfect sense, right? I mean, and when the day I interviewed, God, they put me through the gauntlet. I had to interview every other vice president there, and then Jim was the last guy I saw. I was almost brain dead by the time. When you have a job interview with like 8 or 10 people, and then you have to go see the kingpin. But anyway, there was a time where Jim was in another meeting, so I was waiting to see him, and they put me there was an apartment at the top floor where Jim stayed over sometimes when he didn't want to go back to his place or something. He was working real late or something. But it had a whole shelf of Pogo books, and I realized Kermit the Frog is Pogo the Possum. And in that. And the way you create an interesting group of characters, you have one main character who is normal, and then you have all these wacky, crazy people around him.
Yeah.
And that's what Pogo had, was the most normal one of the group. And then the Howland Owl and Churchill Lafim, the turtle and everything. And Kermit was the most normal one, but his girlfriend's Miss Piggy, and there's Animal and, Beaker and
right. Well, and right down to the swamp setting.
Yes, right, exactly, right?
Yeah.
Right. So for sure I put Pogo at the top of the list, and I think and they said we could add animated cartoons. So I said Chuck Jones and Calvin and Hobbes. And later Jim asked me to he knew I was into comics. He asked me to put him in touch with Watterson, because he was a big fan of Kermit the Frog. But I said, well, Jim, and it was a time we were trying to think up new TV shows to do. And I said, well, okay, Jim, but I just want you to know, Bill Watterson doesn't seem to be interested in anything like a TV show or anything like that. He's really, kind of a purist in that sense. He goes, oh, that's fine. I just really like this strip, and I'd like to talk with him. But Watterson, so I got a hold of one of Watterson's best friends who I knew, and he reached out he says, I don't think Watterson will be interested, but I'll ask him for you, out of respect to Jim Henson. But Watterson turned it down. I mean, I don't fault him. He can do what he wants, and I admire his purity in many regards. So, but it's interesting, like how many people would turn down an opportunity to
surprises me a lot,
to speak to Jim Henson. And Jim just wanted to just tell me he admired him, and maybe share some creative thoughts with each other or something.
I wonder if Watterson is just like old enough that the Henson didn't make Jim Henson's work didn't make a huge impact on.
Well, like I said, Steve Ditko did not know who Jim Henson was, or the Muppets.
That's amazing.
In fact, after I left the Muppets, one of my first major books, I did a book called The Art of Mickey Mouse, where I got because Disney tried to buy the Muppets, so I got to know everybody at Disney, from Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg and all those people, and so in fact, they wanted to hire me after the Muppets, but I decided to go out on my own. But they wanted to hire me for the theme parks, because I helped develop the Muppet attraction down at Walt Disney World, and I hit it off with the.
Was it the 3D movie theater?
Yeah.
That's one of the only ones I ever saw. I remember having seen that in person. I actually saw it, and I was
Jim was proud of that, and
really impressive.
And he told me, like, this is the only movie that the only, how did he put it? It's the only movie where they design a theater for the movie, because the theater was actually a character, and you're showing the movie on the screen, but it was 3D, obviously, and all those fun effects and stuff. But then all of a sudden there's Statler and Waldorf up in a balcony, and then near the end, the there's a big explosion, on the back wall, and so the theater itself, and squirting water on you and stuff when there's
It was
some
great.
guy with a squirt gun or some beaker with a squirt gun or something, so the theater actually came to life. So Jim really dug that, and those people were a lot of fun, the Imagineers. I sometimes wonder if I should have stuck with Disney rather than going out on my own, but you do what you do. You don't look
Right,
back.
that was your moment. You said Disney tried to buy the Muppets, but they succeeded, right? I know they tried a couple of times and then eventually succeeded.
Well, that's kind of an interesting thing because they were days away from signing the final contract, and then Jim, I had lunch with Jim and we were talking about it, and then just he and I were at lunch and we were talking about the Disney deal, and he was about to sign right after all the vetting had gone on for a year and a half or so. They were ready to sign the contract, and it's going to happen any day. We were already getting our paychecks signed by Disney. We were already on the Disney staff in good faith and everything. But then a couple of hours later, he died. So that kind of queered the whole deal. That
Oh my gosh.
because they were not only interested in the characters, they wanted Jim because they knew they didn't have Walt anymore, and they needed some kind of creative guru heading, as a major part of the company. So they kind of soured on the deal. But eventually, years later, they ended up, they did end up buying it, if I'm remembering it all correctly. And they bought them, but wait, they bought the Muppets, and then they divested themselves of the Muppets. I think they tried a couple of things. They divested themselves of the Muppets. And a German company, here I am in Germany, a German company, because the Germans I remember when I was at the Muppets, the Muppets had me fly to Germany just to meet with different Muppety type of businesses and things like that, because the Germans love the Muppets. I got good currency here when people find out that I was a creative director for the Muppets, So, but a German company bought the Muppets, I think for like, for 80 million or something. And then they fell on hard times during some hard times the world goes through, and they sold it to Jim's kids, who bought it back for 17 million.
Oh, wow.
And then a few years ago, they sold it to Disney finally for like, I don't know, 300 million or something. I know it was some crazy.
More like what it's really worth.
Yeah. Well, maybe. Yeah. So I don't know. The Muppets have bounced around a little bit.
Yeah, they have. And they tried interesting things with the Muppets. Were you working with the Muppets in the Muppets Tonight era? Was that? It was one of the new relaunched TV shows.
The main era I was there was for the Jim Henson Hour.
Okay.
And then also the Dinosaur TV show, because I did the first concept drawings for the Dinosaur TV show.
And the creatures, besides being a stickler for quality, Henson was always pushing that technical edge. Like,
he loved the technology part of it. Yeah, he was really into that. In fact,
which makes sense as a puppeteer.
The other day, I'm wondering what he would be doing today, because he obviously loved puppets, and he loved working with puppets and his fellow puppeteers, and that whole, in some sense, low tech, but he also really liked high tech. Like, we were experimenting at the Creature Shop at the time of, a puppet that would, by you moving the puppet's mouth, it would kind of do a digital kind of thing at the same time.
Yes.
He was really quite interested in that. I'll tell you, me going like this reminds me once when we were working on some characters for the Muppet 3D movie, and we were building the puppets, and he came into the Creature Shop, and he and I walked over there, and I said, Jim, we got this to show you. And he goes up there, and the Creature Shop builders laid at the new puppet on the table, and I'm thinking, oh, I hope Jim likes this in my mind, and but it really was. I didn't even remember which exact character it was, but it's just kind of some fur sewn together. You know what I mean? And I'm thinking like, oh, I hope Jim likes this. But this is the first time I really saw him do this. He walks over to the table. He goes, and then he puts his hand, in the puppet Muppet, and then he starts playing with it and speaking to us, and all of a sudden, oh my God, it was like a revelation to me. That character came to life. I mean,
Yeah.
it was like living, breathing, like a real person. You know what I mean? It was like amazing to see him work his magic like that. Just some little
That
feather,
performance art of
feather and
puppetry.
fur, and then he breathes life into it, like God breathed life into Adam or something. It was wild. It was cool.
Yeah, it's almost magical when you see that. I knew a few
Yeah.
puppeteers in my time, and it was like the amount of like practice and concentration, and just like any other performance art form, it's
Yeah.
thousands of hours that get distilled into that performance. I also wanted to say, I think what he would be doing, to tell you the truth, is more of that digital puppet stuff, because
Yeah.
we're getting into now the point where they can render things in real time that look completely realistic. So you could truly do it the way
I know, but yes. Yes, but I don't know. I mean, just right now, I mean, I'm not the computer techie whiz like you are, but so in some ways I don't have a choice, but I'm doing a lot of artwork now, and I really love drawing it old school. I like
yeah.
pencils and pens and paper and colored pencils and watercolor. I like drawing with old school tools. You know what I mean? And I that's what I wonder. I mean, he loved technology. He wasn't afraid of it. He was intrigued by it and wanted to incorporate it into his work, and did. He did some brilliant movie kind of stuff, with technology. But I don't think he would have. I'm wondering. I can't say for sure, but I
I
don't think
think
he
he
would.
would have
I don't. I
embraced.
don't. I think he still would want to stick his hand in sometimes to go, and
Well,
make
that's
things.
what I mean. That's the point, is the best of two worlds that they almost got to. That's why I brought up Muppets Tonight. They had this kind of real-time digital puppet in
Yeah.
that thing, but it was such early days for that stuff that it didn't quite it wasn't
Yeah.
quite there. But now they're doing real-time backgrounds and foregrounds and real-time special effects, like on the practical movie set.
Yeah.
Become a synthesis of those two things that's like right up.
I mean, I may be speaking more about myself than Jim, but
Yeah.
I still I like the feeling of. I think he would like the feeling of. I don't know. I mean, because what's the next step? You could just go to digital and be like Pixar or something all of a sudden. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah.
And Jim did different kinds of movies and stuff. So who knows? Who knows what he would be doing? But
Well, there's
I'm
guys
sure
like
I'm
Brian.
sure it would be wonderful. I'm sure it would be creative and wonderful and full of quality, whatever he was doing.
I'm sure. I mean, there's
Yeah.
guys like Brian Ballin today, who started all ink and now is completely digital, and you can't
Yeah.
tell if you look. You can't tell when he made the transition. He did it so
Oh,
perfect.
well, I think. Oh no, I think I mean, I have played around with it a little bit, and I've seen what people do, and it's amazing. And you can, in some sense, do stuff that you can do exactly where it looks exactly like hand drawn artwork, like this stuff you're showing of mine on screen, or you can you can make it look so incredible, beautiful that would have taken a guy doing it or a gal doing it old school, that it would take him a million years. I mean, I know they still put a lot of time into it. I'm just saying some of the effects that you can do with digital
There's so many
artwork
options.
are
Yeah, so many
amazing.
options. Unlimited
Yeah,
undo.
why limit yourself, really?
Okay. Well, that's what you said when the Muppets sold out to Disney. You're like, screw this corporate gig, man. I'm going on my own, right? So you left the Magic Kingdom and
Yeah.
to the big world. And what happened next?
Well, I decided to open my own studio. I mean, I turned down an offer from Disney, and I didn't want to be at the Muppets anymore either, because I mean, without Jim. I mean, and so I decided to open up my own studio, and the first big project I did was with Disney, the Art of Mickey Mouse book, and so we got all these famous artists, like comic book guys. Some of them comic book guys, like Jack Kirby did a Mickey Mouse for me, and and Peter Max. I got Peter Max to do a Mickey Mouse, and just all these big name artists from around the world. I got them to do their own interpretation of Mickey Mouse. So maybe you can show that book cover on screen if you can find it or something. So anyway, that was my first big project, and then and as I was finishing up that I thought, like, oh, I should contact Nickelodeon. So I contacted them. Yeah, these are just some of the Yoe books that we've done. And so I contacted Ken Quattro's brilliant book.
Oh yeah, I forgot I forgot that you published this. We had Ken on for
I know. I said that. See how quickly we forget. I set up that interview, I think.
Yeah.
So what was I saying? So anyway, then I decided, like, hey, Nickelodeon seems like they'd be fun to do some work for. So I contacted the guy that was the creative director there, and with my Marvin Glass and Muppet background, he gave me an interview right away, and so that was nice. And but it's funny. I remember my follow up with him. I sent him a letter. Back then people actually sent letters and stuff. So I sent him a letter, and I gave him all this bullshit, like, Mr. Webb, it was very nice meeting you in your office the other day. I appreciate the tour of the Nickelodeon company, and I think you guys are doing wonderful things. I would love to, be a part of the fine work you're doing for children. But then so this total bullshit letter. I got an old Marvin Glass had invented plastic vomit. That was one of the inventions at Marvin Glass. So I had a stack of plastic vomit. So I glued the plastic vomit on this bullshit letter and sent it to Scott Webb. And he said the second he got it, he goes, yeah, this is a guy to work with Nickelodeon, So they put me on retainer. I think I did 40 to 60 hours of work. Wow. And then I had a small staff, and we did like 40 to 60 hours a week of work for Nickelodeon. When they were just getting started, their new shows hadn't even their new cartoon shows hadn't even aired. Nickelodeon it started off owned by the MTV networks, but they started off as like kind of a good for you children's programming. Yeah. And they call it their Eat Your Vegetables years, So they had all this like European animation, kind of like soft, sweet children's book style animation or something like that. And they won all kinds of awards, Emmys and stuff like that. But the kids didn't watch it. They didn't like it. And they didn't want to eat their vegetables, So then they had a big meeting. I think they went off on out into the country for a weekend or something at some hotel or something, or some campground or something. And they said, like, let's do since no one's watching, let's just do what we would think would be fun for kids. Yes. And remember our childhood. So that's when the Nickelodeon got wacky and everything like that. So the fact that I sent them this bullshit follow-up letter, with plastic vomit glued to it, that did the trick for them. So they put me on retainer, and we did. And that was, like I said, that was before the cartoon show started. So we eventually, we were creating products and promotions and tie-ins with fast food companies for Ren and Stimpy and Rugrats and Doug and all those great early Nickelodeon shows. And also Scott Webb had me design the interstitial. He said he wanted the opening and closing of the Nicktoon Hour. When they were airing these new animated shows. So he said he wanted something like the Looney Tunes, classic, like the Looney Tunes thing. So I came up with this wacky character who opened and closed all the animated shows and stuff like that. Oh. So that was my first foray into animation. And I really enjoyed that. And then I went on to do work for MTV station ID, animated station IDs, and then I started. Cartoon Network was interested in hiring me, but I still wanted to remain independent, so that they probably found a better guy anyway that was totally into animation to do all their interstitials. But then they hired me to do a bunch of interstitials and openings for their shows and commercials and things like that. So I've enjoyed being independent, getting involved in these different kinds of things. But my first love was, because I was into comic books, my first love was publishing, so I eventually, I did build up a big studio that specialized in children's stuff. And we did work for Toys R Us and McDonald's and Microsoft, and still more work for the Muppets and Pepsi and Taco Bell and all these different companies.
What about Bob's Big Boy?
Oh, well, that was one of our, that was one of the accounts we got. We set up at the licensing show, and this woman came to the license show looking. That was kind of a place like people in business that wanted to do interesting stuff, especially stuff our kids would gather once a year, And so she walked up the aisle, and we handed her some of our stuff, and she started talking. We said, "Well, we're looking for a designer, a company to produce the Big Boy comic book for us." And I go, "Oh my God, I was a reader, I used to go to Manners Big Boy in Akron, Ohio when I grew up, and in fact, one of my most powerful memories was being in a Manners Big Boy, reading the comic book and drinking a green Goulardi milkshake. And so I would love to do the comic book. So she gave us the contract to do the Big Boy comic book, and we had a ball doing it, and it became a major part of our business, because some things came and go, but it was a regular comic book. We were printing millions of them, and using myself, but we had a great artist and writer working with us. Craig Bowman was doing a lot of the writing, who did a lot of work for Archie, and brilliant, funny guy. And then Luke McDonald, he lived in the town where we set up our studio on the Hudson River. And Luke McDonald, and he had worked for Marvel doing Iron Man and drew Phantom comic books. And so we brought him on board. And he had like many artists, he had a funny side and a realistic side in his work, and he did beautiful Big Boy work. So we did the Big Boy comic book for a long time. And we also, again, because I'm so interested in the history of comics and old cartoonists, we got John Stanley did our first cover. He penciled it, I inked it, and Big Boy, I think we eventually, I think we did maybe 100 issues or something. But when we took it on, there was already almost 500 or something, So it was a long-standing thing. It started by Stan Lee. It was a timely Atlas
I didn't know
comic
that.
book, premium comic book started, and Stan wrote it, and Bill Everett drew it, and Dan DeCarlo drew some issues, in the early days, So it was a great act to follow. But we used, I used the Golden Age artist Gil Fox, and then, what's his name that did Batman? Golden Age guy. I said, let's do superheroes. So I
Didn't
came
you say
up
Lou
with
Fine or no?
no. Lou Fine was when I was working at David C. Cook. Oh shoot,
Finger or one of those guys.
No, an artist. He was.
Bill Finger was the writer. What's the guy's name? Yeah, Dick Sprang.
Dick Sprang, yeah.
My favorites.
Oh, he's brilliant. So I said, I contacted him and said, I just came up with a new.
Comics.
Yeah, he's brilliant. And so I said, I came up with a new idea, like let's make Big Boy a superhero. Not every issue, but every third or fourth issue, we had. I named him Bigger Boy, and I can't remember what he did. He ate his magic hamburger and became Bigger Boy. And so I had Dick Sprang do the cover
Amazing
for that, and it's totally like a Batman type scene. He's on a rooftop at nighttime with a gargoyle and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I'm gonna say you worked with a lot
and then I contacted my old buddy Steve Ditko and said, Steve, would you draw an issue of Big Boy? And when I had contacted him to previous to that to say, would you do something for the art of Mickey Mouse? He goes, Mickey Mouse, I don't really know that character, like. That's what I'm saying. He didn't know the Muppets. He really wasn't. He says, I'm not really familiar with Mickey Mouse. It's like, so he turned down Mickey Mouse.
He did an issue of Big Boy, though?
Yeah, he did an issue of Big Boy for me.
What issue is that? I got to buy that issue.
Well, I think it costs money now, and I stupidly threw away a big stack before it moved to Berlin.
Oh, my God. I got to track that down.
But and then I realized later, and I think I looked on the web, and it goes for like $10,000 or something. I don't know what it goes for.
Wow.
But I've got the original. I did save the original art to it though.
Oh man. Hey Craig, we got some nice comments here.
Yeah.
I want to bring them up. Thanks for doing this with
Scorpio Steel. I love Scorpio. He's a great artist and one of my good Facebook buddies. And he's a great artist. See that little icon that he drew? I admire the hell out of that guy. Warren Smith. I was just talking about Warren when I said I assembled a staff and we did all these projects on the Hudson River, and Warren was my first employee, and a finer, nicer, more fun guy and loyal guy I never met than Warren Smith. Reefer Madness. Yes, we did a book for Dark Horse called Reefer Madness. It collects all the Reefer Madness, marijuana type stories from the 50s crime and romance comic books. Very successful book. I love Dark Horse.
Well, so that's a good point
Bigger Boy.
We said we were going to talk about this a little, Craig. So let's talk about what Yoe Books is, an imprint. I've never talked to it. Does that make you an impresario? I don't know. You're an imprint.
It must be from the same root word, I guess.
Maybe. I don't know. So you tell me.
Well, an imprint. I mean, that's. I mean, all big publishing, like HarperCollins or Simon Schuster, they all have like little imprints. Kind of a specialty divisions that work on specific kinds of things. And so, after I did the art of Mickey Mouse.
But those are usually those imprints, and this is me out of ignorance asking you this. So an imprint is generally run with like sort of a singular editorial curational voice, or is that the idea behind an imprint? Or it's a specialty?
You got it exactamundo. You got it exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's a division of a larger company that has its own kind of personality and.
Maybe its own trade dress too, like you do.
Maybe its own trade dress and its own staff, and the parent company, does the distribution and probably usually contracts the printing because they're getting this giant deal from some press that they own in the Orient or something. So an imprint is a division of a larger publishing company. So. The way our imprint came together is I did a book for Abrams, Charlie Kochman at Abrams. It was, in fact, when Abrams Comics Art started, Charlie's a great guy, and he started, he was hired to create a comics division for Abrams, and I told him about this material I had just found, which was Joe. At this antique book sale, I saw this dealer on his table. He had this cardboard box way in the back of the table, and he seemed to be hiding it rather than showing it. And I peered in it, and I could see they were like it was pornographic material. So I thought, that's interesting, because I'm always interested to see look for at obscure pornographic or not pornographic, obscure publications where I might find the work of comic books who were, when they weren't drawing comics, what else were they doing, you know? So I thought I'd look in there, and I pulled one of this little fairly thin book out, and I open it up. I say to myself, "Oh my God, Joe Shuster!" It was Joe Shuster doing pornographic illustrations for these really tawdry books, and the guy had 3 or 4 of them, and or I think maybe I just got 2 or something, and I bought them and took them home. And like and they were numbered, and one was like number 2, and the other was number 8 or something. And I thought, my God, there's more than there. This must have been some kind of series. And so I I started tracking them down, trying to track down the whole series, and and I had to go everywhere, and I would contact erotica dealers in France, or I found a number of them in London, because the people in England are really kinky, and so and this was like S&M kind of material, and so I eventually tracked down most all of them, but there ended up being 16 of these books in the series that was called Knights of Horror. And I was telling him, the renowned and good friend of mine, comics historian Bill Blackbeard, I was telling him about these books, and he said, he said, "Well, it's a good thing Frederick Wortham never heard about those." And I go, "Yeah." And then I went home that night from our studio and came back the next day, and it was still in my head. It's a good thing Wortham and never heard, about these books, because pretty much the artist who jump-started the whole comic book industry was doing porn. So kind of the tie-in that comic books are bad was like, this was like a real smoking gun kind of thing. It would have been for Wortham, but I was thinking Wortham, Knights of Horror. So I, just for the hell of it, they just invented something called Google, and I thought, like, I'll try to put this in this Google thing and put Dr. Wortham plus Knights of Horror. And what came up was some academic site library had some kind of literary periodical that interviewed some woman who interviewed Dr. Wortham, who was an expert witness for court uh, some court that was trying 4 Jewish Nazi juvenile delinquents, and Wortham was called in by the judge to interview the leader of who became known as the Brooklyn Thrill Killers, because they killed bums and horsewhipped girls.
Oh my God.
And with whips that they bought through comic book ads. And the judge had Wortham interview the leader, who was Jack Kozloff, who was a Jewish boy. All four members of the Brooklyn Thrill Killers were Jewish high schoolers with their little gang. And the leader had a Hitler mustache.
Oh my God.
And when it was time to say the Pledge of Allegiance, they would Sieg Heil Hitler. And I have to drop my arms. I can't make a Sieg Heil sign here, because in Germany it's against the law. And I'm talking here from Berlin, Germany, our home now. So anyway, so Wortham interviewed Jack Kozloff in his jail cell. He eventually said he could be tried for murder, that he wasn't totally crazy. But Wortham reported in his notes that Jack Kozloff said that they took their inspiration for these crimes of whipping and things like that from these booklets they had found called Knights of Horror, the ones that were illustrated by Joe Shuster. So
And
So,
really, it's an indictment of the fact that he got such a raw deal on Superman that he even had to do that at that stage in his career, more than any kind of moral impurity.
well, let me kind of wrap up what I was saying, then I'll come back to what you're saying because
Okay.
I
Okay.
think I'm going to disagree with you. We should
Okay.
disagree with each other because disagreeable videos are more popular than us just
That's true.
agreeing with each other, right? I mean,
True.
that's one of the reasons I decided to leave the United States because all the disagreement, and finger pointing, and yelling, and the civil war that's going on there. It just was bugging me too much. But anyway, but I'm up for a little bit. We can be a little disagreeable today, so that
Of course.
your ratings go up a little bit. So anyway, eventually they were tried, and the youngest just got off, and another one, the Brooklyn Thrill Killers, turned state's evidence or something. But the two older guys were thrown in jail and stuff like that. But I realized, my gosh, these are interesting books, and there's such an interesting story about it because you not only have pornography, and the characters are drawn where they look like Superman and Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen
Oh,
and Lex
really?
Luthor.
Okay.
And find the book and put the cover up.
What's it? Is it horror?
Secret Identity. Look up Secret Identity with Joe Shuster. It's called Secret Identity: The Fetish Art of Superman's
Ah,
co-creator Joe Shuster.
yeah. Okay.
And so eventually, I said, like, well, I should show
Yes.
this to. I had been talking with Abrams about doing some books, and I said I should show them and their new, wonder kid, Charlie Kochman. I should show him this material, and Charlie had just come on board days earlier at Abrams, and he knew that this book was a winner. Yeah, Secret Identity. Can you show the cover too? So yeah, so you got Lois Lane whipping Superman, on the cover,
Love it.
essentially in her little negligee.
I love it.
So, and I got Stan Lee to write the introduction, and Stan Lee took in his introduction, he felt that's a piece of Superman original artwork I own. It's pretty cool. Stan Lee took your side on our disagreement here. He felt that Joe had to do this, but me and my friend Bud Plant and other people feel like, and another good friend of mine, Jeff Trexler, I think he said this too. He felt like we look at the work, and it seems like Joe put a lot of love into this. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
he seemed to enjoy this, and he was and learning more about his life. I'm not saying he was Mr. Kinky or something. I know nothing about what went on behind his bedroom doors or something. But he's I mean, we all have our fantasies at least. And he really put a lot of love in these drawings. And one of the things I was glad about this book is it dispelled the idea that he could no longer draw because his eyesight had failed. He had always worn Coke bottle thick glasses, and he put his head right next to the paper as he drew because he always had very bad eyesight, but he could draw like a god, and he drew gods. I mean, he drew Superman, and he did beautiful work, and he really put a lot of love or beauty and skill into this. And in fact, eventually, I showed this to his sister, this book, and she was slightly embarrassed about it, but it was actually a revelation to her because she was a cigarette girl in nightclubs, and she had met some guy in a nightclub, and Joe had been kind of helping support her because he didn't earn a lot of money with tips for cigarette girls and stuff, So he had done his best to support her when Superman was with Superman and it was going good and stuff, but she met this guy and wanted to marry him, and Joe said, I'll help take care of you. I just got a job recently. I'll be able to send you some money. And she realized it was the time period where he was doing this stuff when I had showed it to her. And she realized how he was getting the money. And she said, what beautiful artwork was, but she agreed with you and Stan. She felt he had to do it, but there's some of us that think that he kind of enjoyed it. And learning about him, I know he was a short guy, and he liked tall. He was married for a couple of weeks to a tall, beautiful Las Vegas showgirl, and so he liked showgirls, and he liked strong women. And
well, okay, of your thesis, there's two possibilities here. One is that the guy was just of that era and was a professional, so he's not going to put out less than his highest quality professional work, no matter the subject matter.
Yeah.
But I think the other part that's maybe more feasible is
you just had a guy who made an interesting comment, but go finish yours, please.
Yeah. It's just that a lot of subconscious elements went into the creation of Superman. And
yes. I mean, early Superman, there's now letters, the business letters that they found where Donna Feld's people were telling him to tone down Lois Lane, you're making her too sexy. And, Superman, there's a couple in early issues, he's spanking some girl who did some kind of wrong or something. There was, in the whole, he's breaking chains and stuff like that.
Well, the fascist rude soup.
And yes, thank you. The fascist. That's another whole show.
We talked about this with the Rick Beach a lot.
Yeah, it's one of the things that eventually kind of soured me on superheroes.
Me too.
In many ways, because Wertham was right. Superman was fascism.
He was.
Yeah, he wasn't wrong on everything. And as far as superheroes being fascistic, it's totally true.
Okay, the point you wanted to echo here is John.
Oh, I just thought this was a nice comment. I think John said, I think Joe Shuster wanted to do it. The work is too good for a quick cash in. Yeah, no, it's really good work. And in fact, when Charlie Kochman had me, this was his first book at Abrams Comic Books, when he had me set up at the New York Comic Con. He had a booth, and some guy came up to me and he said he was a teenager helping Phil Seuling at his comic book conventions. And Phil said, I want you to take one of our guests to his apartment. He needs to pick up some stuff that he wants to bring back to the show. And it was Joe Shuster. So this teenager and he was like 16 and he didn't have a driver's license. So he went with this other guy, and they went to Joe's apartment. And he said, Joe pulled out his portfolio and said, hey, you guys want to see this? And he showed him some fetish art that he was doing. So he must have been doing that on his. I don't know that it was just the Knights of War stuff or something else that he was doing, but I think
maybe Stan and I are both moralizing too. Like, there's nothing wrong with what he drew. Who cares? Like, if he was into it, is that a big deal?
Yeah. I mean, really, yeah. And in some ways, it's sort of progressive. The work is. Some people would think of it as sort of progressive, and it's showing sexual freedom. There are strong women characters, and
it's like a Craig Yoe drawing.
Yeah, that's kind of a kinky. That's a kind of a kinky maybe drawing. Joe Shuster by way of Salvador Dali or something.
This has got to be my favorite Yoe drawing of them all.
Oh yeah, Mr. Pencil. Get the lead out. So I mean, and there's black characters in there and Asian characters, and it's an interesting mix. Sexual freedom.
It looks like
and no people were really harmed in the making of the work, but the Brooklyn Thrill Killers were inspired by it, unfortunately, and they did murder people and whip girls in the Brooklyn parks, and so there you go. Dave Krausen, can't blame you, Craig. The social wars are idiotic. Yeah. I mean, I loved the United States. It was good to me. I found comic books there, and Germany didn't have a good comic book. They were too busy doing horrible things to make comic books, in the 40s and stuff. So I love the United States for many reasons. I grew up and had a happy childhood there, but I'm sort of glad to be away from all the the madness there. Not that there's not madness around the world. I mean, we're close to some pretty mad stuff here. This war and everything. And I'm an old hippie. And I'm a peacenik pacifist, and so all this war stuff.
Well, so that begs a question, Craig, because how did a peace-loving hippie become a regular Fox News contributor? I'm looking that up.
Well, actually, it was the Joe Shuster book, because Abrams had a hell of a great publicity department. And in fact, that book, I think it was the most reviewed and publicized book to comics oriented to that day, because people just loved it. I mean, we were in Time magazine to Playboy and Hustler to Newsweek, and I was
that's
every
cool.
day. Every day I was on radio shows, and the Playboy channel had me on, and Fox and CNN contacted me and interviewed me about because this story had everything. It had erotica, it had Superman, it had starving artists, it had Hitler, it had showgirls, and murders and Jewish juvenile delinquent Nazis, and it was like. In fact, there's a Hollywood group that have been threatening for a while to produce a movie based on this book, and they're great people, and I hope they eventually pull that together. So the story had everything, and Fox News, Greg Gutfeld, I can't remember what his show was called then, but he had me on
Red Eye. Probably Red Eye.
Red Eye, right? He had me on Red Eye, and they picked me up in a limo from my studio about an hour from New York City, and brought me into Fox News, and I was on the show. And in addition to it being an interesting book to talk about, an interesting story, an interview for them, I got to say I was kind of funny, and slightly entertaining, much more funny than I am on your show. This is so serious.
What are you gonna do? Talking about Nazi, you're the one bringing up Nazi thrill killers.
But I thought, I thought I'd play it for laughs a little bit. And so anyway, he invited me back again, and the second time it was about another book I had done. I can't remember which one that was. And but then he enjoyed me so much, he offered me to become a regular guest. He used to have a regular crew with different viewpoints, because I don't quite. I mean, I don't know where Greg is at now, but back then he was a libertarian. I don't think he was exactly in line with the other Fox hosts. So I'm not sure I was 100% in agreement with all his beliefs, but though I wasn't that familiar with them anyway. So anyway, I entertained the idea, but I thought I'm too busy. So I passed up my opportunity to be one of the Fox News hosts.
Could have been your thing, dude. You could have been preaching anti-wokeness as we speak. You've got a good look for that, preaching.
I don't know. I don't like to get into all that political upheaval and civil war that the U.S. is in right now. I mean, I'm not saying Germany or Europe. My wife's originally from Italy. The whole world has trouble right now. Russia and Ukraine and the whole world is a mess. And I hope I'm still rooting for peace and love, and I'm not ashamed to flash the peace sign. And with my hero give peace a chance.
Okay, El Cruda says, don't touch that rail, brah. Don't touch that third rail. What I think, though, is your work is political, is as current and contemporary as it's ever been. Should we talk about your latest book and how it's torn?
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
This is a good segue to talk about Ban This Book, Matching Book, Ban This Book. Tell us what this is all about.
Well,
and then we read it.
I was hearing afar here in Europe. We do get the news. It's about 3 or 4 weeks late, because it comes by boat or something. But I was reading about all these school boards and the one in Tennessee not wanting mouse as part of their curriculum any longer. And I mean, again, I kind of look at things from different viewpoints. I think they're perfectly in their right to choose the books they want, but I personally think mouse is brilliant, and they should have it
I agree
as
with both
part of
opinions.
their curriculum. But it's kind of a catchphrase because people were saying they were banning the book. They weren't actually
Yeah,
banning
right.
the book. They were just deciding to use another book for their curriculum, which I think was a big mistake. But there is book banning going on in the United States, and in fact, a couple of weeks after that, one of my Christian brothers, I guess, started burning books and stuff. He got his congregation together, and they were burning books, and so all this kind of
That old song.
we in Germany invented that, but I don't think anybody should have taken it up, you know. All that was really concerning me. I mean, I believe in freedom of the press, number one, and then number two, I'm a publisher. I don't like somebody says burning books. It makes my skin makes me really squeamish, you know. So I thought, like, well, I should raise my voice, and I do every once in a while raise my little voice, not loudly, but I say something. So I've been fooling around with children's books lately, doing children's books, and so I thought I would do one and this is for kids and adults. I create these characters, Match and Book, and Match is he's touting his favorite phrase, ban this book, you know, and much to the shock of Book. So if you want, it's just a quick 32-page children's book. You and I could read it. I think you would be good for the Match part if you want to assume that role, and I could be Book since I'm the hero.
Okay, I love.
So you'll be the villain, and I'll be
I love censorship. It's perfect.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you love book burning. I know. We're typecasting you here.
Okay.
So shall we read it together for the amusement and enlightenment of your listeners here?
Is it story time? I think it's story time.
It's gather around, children. Everybody, quit poking each other and
great.
And settle down and cross your legs and sit in a circle, and let's read Ban This Book, starring Match. Hello, Match. And
Hi
Book.
there.
And Book. That's me. Hey.
What kind of voice? I'm thinking he's angry. He's hot. He's hot. Angry voice. Angry voice.
Oh yeah, he's a very angry guy. No, yeah, he's a very angry guy. No, I did draw up on all the anger in the United States when I created him.
Okay, American anger. That's my mission.
Yeah, and Book. I think maybe I'll kind of do a Kermie voice. Maybe even Book is a sweet kid.
He's a sweet.
All right, you want to turn the page?
Yeah, hang on.
Okay.
Make sure I can do this. I'm all set up. Okay.
Oh, that's the title page. We have a book. That's me whistling on. Oh, I gotta wet my whistle. Wait, no, back to the whistle.
Do it.
Oh, that's a lousy whistle. Anyway, it'll get better, folks. Hey, that's my part, even though I'm not doing it good. Okay, you're on.
Hey, all right. Where do you think you're going, Book?
Oh, hi, Match. I'm going to school.
What's in your book bag?
A book?
Does it tell a tale of a boy with two dads?
Is that bad?
That's one too many. Better he didn't have any.
No, better he didn't have any. We really emphasize any.
Okay, I'll work on that.
All right, good. Next page. Ramp it up, though. Ramp up that anger.
Sorry, buddy. Does your book have animals without clothes?
Maybe a dog.
I do not like naked frogs. I do not like naked hogs. I do not like any naked dogs.
Oh, you brought in the Tennessee accent there.
I don't like animals with clothes either, especially cats with hats.
Oh, the books you will throw.
Besides, animals and things don't really talk.
Well said.
I hope your book doesn't have any wizards and witches and goblins. Oh my!
That would be grim. Get it, grim?
I love it. Does your book have any language in air quotes?
You mean like words?
Yes, but bad words.
Oh, I gotta get my glasses. I can't even remember my own book. I really can't say. Oh no, he's whispering. I really can't say.
Does your book have parts that hint at, the birds and the bees? You know what I mean?
They flew right over my head. Whew.
A book shouldn't tell any unpleasant history.
Why should history be a mystery?
Also, a book with a girl in the lead, ye shall not read. You shall not read.
Now, all these criticisms of Match is saying, there's actually, I investigated, Google again was my friend, I investigated all these reasons for books being banned or taken out of libraries or schools, and that was one of the criticisms they had for some books, is that the girls were in the lead, the lead character in some of these books, and they thought that was bad. So all these are kind of based on real, true incidents and sad.
Never read the Ramona books like I did when I was a kid, obviously.
Yeah. Anyway, say it again.
All right, say it again. A book with a girl in the lead, you shall not read.
I'll see what my mom says about that.
Sad books make me mad.
Yeah, that was another criticism that school boards took books out of the curriculum because some of the books about the Holocaust were sad.
They were sad, not happy.
This book is kind of sad, but the flames that you're fanning and the books that you're banning can't stop me from planning to read the books that I choose.
Oh, I got nothing more to say. I love it.
Yeah, he put Match in his place. Blew out the flame.
The message is pretty simple, but I don't know. I have a feeling that, like, if you were to show this book to some of those the parents going to those school board meetings, like, they would have real problems with this. What do you think about that?
They might ban this book, just like its name. By the way, can I do a little promo? This book, and I self-published this book because I wanted to get it out quick. And now these days, it takes a year for a book to go, from idea or from when a publisher gets it and then gets it out into the public and in stores and stuff. So I self-published this, so you can order it on Amazon. So order it for your adult and kid friends and local libraries, and give it to your kid's teacher and your pastor, and and have fun with it. I tried to make it fun, and oh, look at you! You do look like Match. Oh my God, you're a match for Match.
I got a match for you. All right. I'm going to recommend everyone check this out. I'm going to read this to my kids tonight, Craig, and I'll give you the official.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, so you can get it on Amazon, or bookstores and comic shops can order it through Ingram's, so they can carry it in their bookstores and comic shops. And
great.
And I hope people get it. And if you do, find me on Facebook and tell me how much you enjoyed it, and send me a shot of you reading it to friends, lovers, and family.
That's an interesting interesting point, though, Craig, that I wanted to ask you, do you sell more books into, and maybe you don't even know this, do you sell more books to comic shops or bookstores, do you think, overall, like the whole Yoe Books output?
Well, I think the heart of our publishing activities is the comic shops, and I certainly love the comic shops, and like you and me, diehard comic fans, and they're going to order every book, or many of them. You know what I mean? They're very loyal readers, so they're a very important part of it. But certainly, because we try to do really nice most of them are hardback and prestige value. prestigious, feeling to them and stuff. And
Mhm.
also I write. All our books aren't just slacked together reprints of old comics or something like that. We provide context and introduction and rare photos of the artists and a backstory, because I think when I was creating theme park attractions for Disney, they were telling me how much story is such an important part of what they do. And even where, like, when you're standing in line waiting to get into the attraction, they actually, there's monitors above you so that you're entertained, and they're telling you some kind of story. And they're telling you what a good part, that story is so much an important part of the experience. So our books tell a story about the comics that they present. So the story relates to both the fan who wants to know more historical detail, and then just the more general public. We try to write to the public, so it's not just for fanboys that would understand the context of the material. So our books are very successful in bookstores, and we're glad about that.
Yeah, I'll bet.
And just like I used to be an evangelical minister, I sort of an evangelist for comics. I like to tell people about, especially old comics. So now we're doing a lot of graphic novels too. We did Robert Grossman's Eisner-nominated graphic novel "Life on the Moon," and it was Eisner nominated, and so it
I didn't know
certainly
that.
got attention, and we found fans. But I think that's one of the most brilliant graphic novels, up there with Mouse
Oh, wow.
and uh, you know, Persepolis, and I mean, I'm not. Those things are rarefied. It's up there with them. Those things are unbeatable as far as quality and appeal. But I think Life on the Moon is such a brilliant book. I hope if you're on Amazon ordering Bandit's book, you should order Life on the Moon who was done by the brilliant illustrator. He worked on this for a dozen years, Robert Grossman, and he did Time magazine covers and Rolling Stone
Oh,
covers and
okay.
Bob
I'm
Dylan
definitely
posters, and
looking up that one. That flew
he
under
did.
my radar for sure.
Yeah, he did the airplane poster, with the airplane tied in the knot for the airplane movie. And he was a brilliant illustrator who, it turned out, he was also a brilliant writer. I think he wrote a brilliant novel. In fact, I need to send a copy to the people that are representing Secret Identity to Hollywood, and I need to send them a copy of that book, because they should that it would make a great movie what he did. Not that gives comic books credibility or value being in movies. In fact, I kind of wish there weren't all these movies. Now it's the tail wagging the dog.
It's crazy.
I like printed comic books. I'm old school. I like printed comic books on little off register and little wacky, and that's what gets me up in the morning. I love old comic books. I love the smell of them, the feel of them.
What's crazy to me is that in this day, Brian Hibbs's book scan just came out. We were talking about that a little bit earlier, and Marvel, despite dominating like world pop culture with their
Yes.
movies for over a decade now, can't place any comics in like the top books anyway, collected volumes in the top 750. Like, they are the bottom of the barrel of publishers, coming in after Boom and IDW and Dark Horse and all these guys. Marvel is dead last. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. We've done, and we're going to be doing some more Marvel books. I love those people, and I love their properties and their.
Here's one of your Marvel books right here, right?
Comics.
Where did this thing come
Well, this was actually a commission from a good friend of mine. You've been showing some of my artwork here and there, and my good friend Tim Fish, his favorite comic book cover is this Hulk 81, which I know is an iconic cover, and he asked me to do a Yoe, in the Yoe style, a Yoe version of that cover. So I made it kind of wacky. The Hulk has Popeye type arms, and
Got a lot. And we didn't even talk about your Yoe Popeye book, and I've got a compliment to give you, by the way. I I took my kid to my old comic book store, which is owned by somebody else now, and they have a great all ages section. And I let her pick out whatever she wanted, and she picked out a Yoe Books Popeye.
Oh, good kid. Yeah, Bud Sagendorf did brilliant comic book stories. I mean, the artwork and the writing are still hilarious. I mean, it's a classic character, so the classic stories. But
we love Popeye here.
He did brilliant stories. In fact, we have a Popeye book in the works that you're going to enjoy, because when we did all those Popeye comic books that were eventually collected into the books, like your daughter got, I guess.
No, she got one of the comics.
She got one of the comics. Okay,
yeah,
well,
we
did variant covers for those comics with all these kind of wacky, the same kind of, when I did the art of Mickey Mouse, that kind of set a trend of. I really think it was, the first real publishing thing where the people were doing variants on properties, and so that for the good or bad, I think it eventually led to variant covers on comic books. So
rage.
That's the rage now. But we did a bunch of Popeye variant covers, and now we're collecting all those in a book. And King Features also did a bunch of variant strips. Again, King Features told me once that they were inspired by my the Art of Mickey Mouse book, that did all the variant Mickey Mouses. So did we talk about that here on the show? So after I left the Muppets, I did a book for Disney.
Yeah,
and their first book, The Art of Mickey Mouse, where I had all these different artists. Yeah, we did mention that, so we don't need to go over it.
I got one thing left on my list for sure that we have to plug, and we can talk about anything, but let's talk for a second about this book.
Oh, okay. Yeah. This my good friend Miriam, I used to speak on creativity a lot. I was an adjunct professor teaching about creativity at Syracuse University, and then I was asked to be the chairman of a conference in Singapore about creativity and also reaching kids through creativity. And there was a woman there who's now become a good friend of mine, Miriam, who was at a conference in this hotel in Singapore, and she got bored with her conference. She's a creative soul. She got bored with somebody lecturing or something, so she wandered the halls, and she ran and came into our conference as I was giving the keynote speech, and she was taken by what I was saying about creativity and kids and reaching them, and she came up to me afterwards, having snuck into our conference, and said, "Hey, I'm one of the world's leading hand washing experts, and we're trying to reach kids because," as she explained to me, millions of kids die every year because they don't properly wash their hands, and they get diarrheal related diseases and expire before they're the age of 5, and so they wanted to teach kids the importance in developing countries, the importance of washing their hands. And so we tried a few different ideas, and our studio came up with different things, and we tried and we looked into it. And the company she was working for, Unilever, they were going to sponsor this mission because they sold Lifebuoy soap, so it was good for the world, and it was good for selling soap. So we kicked around some ideas over a year and a half, I think. We brainstormed with them, and I thought, like, comic books, and Big Boy. We were doing Big Boy comics. I don't know why I didn't think of this first. I go, why don't we do a comic book? Because rather than, like, we were thinking, we could have a theater group go from school to school and they kids tour some interactive bus or something. But that's kind of expensive and everything. But what's cheaper than ink on paper? And especially when you're trying to reach people in digital, developing countries that don't have computers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we came up with the
handed on secondary effect.
So we came up with the idea of comic books, and I was inspired by Marvel. So I have a group of heroes, and they have a school. just like Professor X. And so we call it the School of Five because there's 5 occasions, Dan, that you wash your hands. Once before each meal, that's 3 of them. And then at bath time, and then after going to the loo, that's the bathroom. So British for bathroom. So those are the 5 occasions. So each of the characters show the cover again. Each of the characters represent a different, can you show the cover big again for a second?
Yeah.
So we have, this is Harry back, and we use the same big boy artists and writers, Craig Yoe and Luke McDonald, and Luke and I came up with a Harry Backstroke, and he represents washing your hands after going to the bathroom. And then these are like Huey, Dewey, and Louie stand-ins, because again, my first exposure to comics was Uncle Scrooge and Donald and the Huey, Dewey, and Louie. So I made Biff, Bam, and Pow, and they represent the 3 meals that you wash your hands for to eat. And then this is the villain, and his name is No Good, and he hates clean. So we have the School of Five, but the phenomena of this is that eventually, I think they've printed 60 million of these comic books.
Wow.
It's in over I think at 23 countries in the same number of languages, and I believe it's the highest circulated comic book in the history of comic books.
Wow.
But bigger and better than that is it's literally saving millions of lives every year, and kids in these developing countries love these. I mean, they send me videos and photos of handing them out to kids through their schools, and the kids are crying because I eventually went over to India and Africa and saw some of these schools, and some of them are, they have dirt floors and outside rudimentary primitive bathrooms, and I take my kids to school, and the kindergarten has one wall is a digital screen, and there's posters and colorful books and fun rugs and everything like that. All they have is a dirt floor.
Yeah,
and
totally.
and a half a piece of a chalk on this old chalkboard, and the windows, are grimy, and it looks. When I first approached the schools, I thought it was like an abandoned building or something.
Yeah,
totally. They're
totally.
sad. So they get these colorful comic books with these fun characters, and they're learning about washing hands and saving their own lives and the lives of their families. The comic book turns the kids on through the teachers with the comic books. They turn on the kids, and then the kids encourage their parents to start buying and using soap, and it's a wonder, and we're saving lives.
Virtuous cycle. I love that.
Yeah. So I mean,
never more important than in the last couple of years too.
And these are real superheroes. They're not promoting fascism or vigilanteism. They're promoting kids washing their hands and saving their own lives. And then we went on to do comic books with associates of Miriam's. Miriam, by the way, has written a brilliant book about hand washing and social missions, corporations sponsoring social missions, and it's called Brands with a Mission. And I highly recommend, when you go to Amazon to get this book, and what was the other book we were going to have you get? But you should get Brands with a Mission if you want to, and because she talks a lot about how we developed this comic book
and the Schuster book the Schuster book.
The Schuster book,
okay,
and, from Abrams. But so so we've gotten kids to get clean toilets for their school. One comic book, another comic book gets the kids to brush their teeth, and because that's the biggest. You don't realize till you get into the stuff. That's the biggest reason for school absenteeism in the world is bad teeth, because kids don't brush their teeth properly, and so they get toothache and stay home.
I didn't know that.
Anyway, it sounds like you got to wrap up the show or something.
Not yet, but I got another thing to show. I got one last thing that I wanted to show that you hit me to.
Okay.
that I want to just put on screen for so we can talk while it's playing. I think we'll see. I might have to turn the volume down, but this is somebody I'd never heard of. And you said, I remind you of this guy.
Oh, yeah.
So let's take a look at Ghoulardi.
We can do here. The tragedy of Julius Caesar. Okay? All right. And another snappy one. Romeo and Juliet.
The part I really want to show is what's coming up in a second.
The Three Knips. And this is my favorite one. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Don't throw them back, kid. How's time? How's time? What does that mean? I haven't figured that one out yet. Oh, come on out of there. All right. This is called the Ghoul Post. Totem Ghoul. There we are up there. Ghoulardi's coloring book. Stay sick, Knips. These are a pair of bony hands. Color them bony. This is the Invisible Man. Color him gone. This is a sick kid. Color him sick. This is a drooper man. Color him droopy. What is that, drooper man? I don't understand. This is a fat man. Color him blubber. This is Ghoulardi's pet dog. Color him hungry. This is the end. Color it finished.
I loved
That's
it.
Ghoulardi. He
And the
was
fact
like
that he's showing comics.
well, he was the original TV horror host. You know, I mean, there was obviously all kinds of guys that heard about his success in Cleveland, Ohio, around where I grew up, and you know, they aped him and imitated him. And but for us growing up in northeastern Ohio, I was from Akron. He was as big as the Beatles. It was around the same time, and he was very big to us and as influential and important to us. And many, you know, and in my school, you know, we inherited so much of inspiration from the wackiness and rebelliousness of Ghoulardi. And so Chrissy Hind was one of my classmates, and she was in art club with me. And another guy that was in art club was Dave Scroggie from Dark Horse Comics. And so we had a good time. But Devo came from our high school in Akron. But we were all influenced by Ghoulardi. He was as much of an influence as John, Paul, George, and Ringo to us. He was important.
It's just when I turned it on, I had some other clips I wanted to show, but he played music in the background.
Oh, yeah. He played,
and that got picked up by YouTube, and they're like, no, that's copyrighted. In fact, YouTube didn't say it was copyrighted. They said, we think this is a cover of a copyrighted tune, and they wouldn't let me play.
Oh, no.
Kind of a drag.
Yeah, he used to play Surfing Bird and all. Well, everybody's heard about the bird. Oh, wait, I can't sing that. But I only sang 2 seconds of it.
I know it's a cover version, but yeah, you literally can't. But I just love that he had his own version of the $1 Million Comics Cam, even back then.
Well, you know, in fact, I'm possibly one of those pieces of kids used to send in comics and artwork they drew, and one of those that you just showed might be by Paul Mavridis, the great underground cartoonist who drew who drew the Freak Brothers and all, because Paul used to send in artwork to Ghoulardi, and Ghoulardi used to show it on screen and stuff. Paul was an amazing artist way back then. Paul and I started doing comic fanzines. I bought a mimeograph from some church was getting rid of their old one. I bought to do comic fanzines. So I was part of the original comics fandom in the 1960s, mid 60s, doing comics fanzines. And instead of doing them about superheroes, because everybody was doing that, I was doing Western comics. I was always kind of going against the grain, you know what I mean? So, but I was doing comics fanzines. I called mine Yoe after my hero from Catch 22, you know, the anti-war book. And so I did the comics fanzine called Yoe. But then I met up with Paul Mavridis, who went on to draw Freak Brothers. But he and I and a couple other hippies were putting out the hippies' answer to our school newspaper. Our school newspaper was called the Firestone Focus, named after Firestone High School's Firestone Focus. So we put out the hippies' crocus instead of the focus, because we were flower children. So we put out an underground high school newspaper together. And Paul did brilliant covers. I did a few of the covers, and we were into it. We loved that, and that's how really I got in. That's how he's going to be in an interview. All right, he's a great guy.
Not here with my pal. I wanted to reach out to him, but my pal Brian Hibbs of Comics Experience, the guy who writes that comics market wrap-up thing, he's going to be interviewing him live stream for his book club. By the way, that's somebody you should probably talk to, because Brian Hibbs does a thing where he has a book club and he has members that get like a book of the month. And so Brian orders many. He's got hundreds of members.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Maybe
I admire his writings. I always read his annual reports and
he's a great guy. He's got the kids book club and the adults book club too. So there's a Yoe angle there.
Well, you got to hook me up.
Okay, I will. Craig, I got to get out of here. Unfortunately, I could talk to you for a lot.
I know longer. we didn't get to talk about my stint at Nickelodeon, but anyway, next time.
Will you come back? That was my next question. Will you come back?
Of course I will.
Okay, and will you? How about this? I put a few people on the spot. Will you do an impromptu commercial for the $1 Million mailbox? This address that you see.
What do I say? What am I supposed to say?
The whole idea is we want you to extol the virtues of the $1 Million mailbox and the fact that I will look at your comics and review them live on there.
Oh, yeah.
And the address.
No, I can't. Who's more enthusiastic or loves comics more than Dan? And if you send him your comics, he's going to make you uber famous by putting your comic on his podcast. He's going to give it a great shout out. And hey, participatory. Don't just have your comics sit in the warehouse or your basement. Send them to Dan so that he can move them out for you and give you a great review.
Oh man, thank you, Craig.
Just send your comic book, and inside inside the front cover, stick a little $50 bill in there, and Dan will give you a great review.
Oh man, thank you so much, Craig.
Isn't that how it works, Dan?
It's 100 now, but whatever.
Okay,
it's no big deal. I'll take what I can get. And you send me $50 and you're like tripling my YouTube income for the year. Right. So
well, you got a great show, and I thank you for everybody that joined us tonight, and tell your friends to listen to the recast of it. And
wait, I got one last comment here that was my favorite comment of the show.
It's the best interview with Craig. This is a guy who is a tremendous help with our books. There's hardly a book that we've published that he hasn't helped to make better by his editorial expertise. And so this is the best interview he's ever seen or read. Wow.
Or read.
Yeah.
There's something else there'll be something extra in your envelope, Stephen Thompson, this month. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Oh, great. Thank you, Steve, for all your help and all you do. All right, cool. And his wife helps us too, Renee. It's a family kind of thing.
Okay, well, what are we at? 1 hour and 52 minutes. Let's call this part 1, Craig, and we'll bring you back in the not
all right
and chat.
All right.
Okay, I'm going to play the credits.
Number 2. Yes, you do that part. Credit where credit's due.
And a little cameo at the end. Stick around if you got time to chat afterwards. Otherwise, I understand if you have to go.
All right. We'll kiss goodbye and after your credits. Credit where credit's due. Roll them.
Can't wait. Thanks, Craig. Okay, guys, thank you so much for watching this thing. Wasn't that awesome? I would plug the $1 Million mailbox like I usually do at the end of the show, but hey, Craig already did it for me. So what I'm going to plug instead is what? I'm going to plug my new shows in the Danger Room. And also I'm going to say, please consider clicking like on this video if you like this interview. If you are not subscribed to this video, please consider hitting that subscribe button. My subscriber count, it's growing, but it grows slowly. And sometimes it dips a couple and it goes back up. And I know for a fact that at least 50% of the people watching this are not subscribed. So if you got a moment, think about it. Click that thing. Okay. Come back on Friday for serious Star Trek, me and Larry are going to come in and just talk about Star Trek and sci-fi and all that stuff like we normally do. And then the following Tuesday, come back for Danger Room, where I'm going to talk about, I have no idea right now. And that's the fun part to me. I'm going to be doing a little more extemporaneous streaming on Tuesdays at 11, something a little more focused on Thursdays at 11, trying to scratch my creative itches. I've got several. I hear there's an ointment for that. Until then, though, I want you to check out these credits. Check out the comic book cameo at the end of the credits, which I have not selected yet, but I will. And then come back to watch me again when? Oh, yeah, next time.